The NFL season kicks off tomorrow, which means the Seahawks' first game of the year is just a few days away. After a summer of insight from local and national reporters, we're turning to you to answer your most burning questions about the 2024 season. Let's light them up.
I'm Jacson Bevins, and this is Cigar Thoughts.
Welcome back to the Cigar Lounge. I am Jacson Bevins, and along with my waggish producer, Mike Barwin, this is the Cigar Thoughts podcast. Mike, how we doing today?
Jackson, how do you think we're doing? It's football season, baby. Come on now.
Freaking stoked.
We made it. It's finally
I can't believe it, man. I can't believe it. You know, this felt like the longest summer in a long time. And I don't know if it had to do with the fact that this is like a total new era, or I know both you and I have had a lot of stuff going on, all good things in our personal and professional lives this summer, but all of a sudden it's football season. And I mean, truly turning the page in this franchise's history. I cannot wait.
I know, man. It feels like 2 years ago that the Seahawks let go of Pete Carroll. Mike Macdonald was hired. The Chiefs beat the 49ers in the Super Bowl. That's right. That happened. I forgot. I'm so sorry to mention that for any potential listeners.
Who did the Chiefs beat?
Yeah, we don't need to, they've gone through enough. Let them be. But it's football season. The Seahawks play the Denver Broncos on Sunday, which has been a historically good bet for the team.
Yeah. One way to feel better about being a Seahawks fan is to think about the Denver Broncos over the last few years. But Broncos Twitter, they've been loud this year. So I'm really excited to see how this game goes. I mean, they're entering a new era too. So it is a very interesting game coming up for us. But like all in all, man, it truly feels, my favorite Calvin and Hobbes strip, or one of them, it was the very last one. And it was a New Year's Eve, the one. And Calvin and Hobbes are walking through the snow. They're carrying a sled. And he said, he's talking about how when the snow is covering the ground, the whole world feels like a blank canvas. And let's go exploring. The final words from Bill Watterson, let's go exploring. And that's how I feel coming into the season, man. I mean, it truly does feel like, let's see what's out there instead of, can we make the same thing as the last few years work better this time?
Yeah, the canvas is an appropriate analogy because the Seahawks think that they've hired Michelangelo, right? For the defensive side of the ball, which has been lacking.
You're just trying to sneak an extra mic in there.
Well, I do what I can. But we've hyped up the hiring of Mike Macdonald so much. It feels like the hype has been coming from all directions, a universally acclaimed hiring. Mm-hmm. So it's time to turn all that hype into reality. Let's see what happens when cleats touch grass, or turf, I guess in this case. But I don't know. There's been a lot of talking. There's been a lot of conversations about Geno Smith. We've dealt with a lot of different conflicting narratives throughout the offseason. And, Ryan Grubb is in town. How is that going to translate to the NFL? There's a lot to discuss. There's a lot to get to. And so I'm happy that we're doing a mailbag, buddy.
I am too. It feels like perfect timing and really overwhelmed with the response when we put the call out, and some really, really good questions. Everything that you just brought up, we're going to talk about as we answer some of these queries. And I'm really, really looking forward to doing that. People who've been listening to this show from the beginning have heard me say it before, but I feel so incredibly honored that we get to have the guests on that we do. But when I get a chance to just roll it out with you and talk ball with my buddy Mike, I get really stoked about that too. And we're going to jump into that. But before we do, I do want to remind everyone that Cigar Thoughts is proud to be sponsored by Seattle Cigar Concierge and Balvenie Single Malt Scotch Whiskey, two companies that I love. I mean, on one hand, it's really, really cool to have that professional support of the show. But they're also companies whose products I consume on a regular basis. Huge fan. And, those of you who've been joining us all summer already know this, but for those of you who are checking back in right before the season, we have teamed back up with Seattle Cigar Concierge for an exciting second release of the Cigar Thought cigars. We are introducing the Red Zone series. It's the same quality. It's the same 13-year age premium Dominican tobacco leaf that you're used to with the Cigar Thoughts Originals, but with a lighter Connecticut wrapper. And they are available for the same discounted price of $149 for a bundle of 10. Again, these exact same cigars do get banded and branded by one of the top distributors in the world, and they sell for $35 to $40 a stick. You can get them, like I said, bundle of 10 for just $149. They come with a Boveda humidification pack. They'll be in a Mylar bag, so they'll stay fresh whether you have the humidor or not. And our goal with this when we started was, I've been super blessed. I got introduced to the world of high-end cigars years ago and have gotten hooked. And the challenge with it is just price point to get into that really top tier of cigars. And because of this agreement, we're able to offer that $30, $40 cigar experience for just $15 a stick. So they make a great gift. Get some for yourself, get some for a friend or a client, family member, and you can get those by hitting the link on the show page, going to cigarthoughtsnfl.com. We got you all taken care of. Look, we love doing this show. And as always, there are two ways that if you're listening or watching, you can support us. One is by purchasing the cigars. The other is by subscribing to the YouTube channel and liking the stuff that, you're into. That really does help build the momentum so that we can keep this going. Mike puts together these really great clips every week. And of course, the full episodes are available on video as well. So give us the thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a comment. We'd love to know what you guys think about the show. And of course, you can listen to us everywhere that you get your podcasts. And look, Mike, as lucky as we are to get to talk to some of the most connected people covering the NFL, I really do cherish the opportunities we get to hear what the people think. And with that in mind, we did put out the call for your questions, and we got a whole sack full of them. So let's jump right in.
All right.
Mike, what do we got?
Let's do it. We got a lot of great, insightful questions. And so let's start.
I was really impressed with the quality of questions.
Really, really good stuff heading into the season. Everybody's pumped and jacked for football to be back. So let's dive in.
Shout out, Pete.
First question's from Ethan Ludlam. Ethan says, there are a lot of names in Seattle's front seven. Who are we not talking enough about that'll have the greatest impact on Seattle's defensive success this year?
Yeah, it's a great question because, there is a lot of talent there. Obviously, first round draft pick Byron Murphy has made a lot of headlines and he's looked great in the preseason. The reports out of camp are fantastic. They just gave Leonard Williams a whole pile of money. Obviously traded a lot to get him last year. You got Uchenna Nwosu, sounds like he's going to be back sooner than feared. Originally, he's coming off of, back-to-back really great seasons with Seattle. And there's other talent there. The guy that I kind of have earmarked, I don't think is going to be an early contributor, but I think by the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised if we're not talking about him as a mainstay moving forward. And that's Tyrese Knight, the rookie linebacker that they grabbed. He's someone that Mike Macdonald has actually talked a lot about in his press conferences. More than probably any of the other non-top tier players on this roster. And you got to remember, Mike Macdonald was a linebackers coach. That is what his basis as a professional NFL coach is coaching up the linebackers. And when you hear the Ravens linebackers talk about the way that he coached them, it's almost reverential. Tyrese Knight is a very instinctive ball player. I think that he's a little bit loose. There's a lot that needs to get tightened up in terms of spacing and tackling. But at the end of the day, this is a guy who recorded more solo tackles than any player in college football last year. He has a nose for the ball. He knows how to get there. And linebacker is one of those positions where I think instinct matters. Like, you can teach stuff at other positions where it's like, hey, here's your key, and you go off of that. Like, you can drill that into a player. At linebacker, especially off ball, you have so much to consider. And if Tyrese Knight hits, he's going to be right in the center of this defense for the next few years. So he's the guy that I have kind of earmarked as the one I'm watching in the front seven.
The name that comes to mind for me from the front seven in terms of the greatest impact on Seattle's defensive success this year is probably Jarran Reed, in the sense that if the Seahawks are going to get the most out of what looks like a deep defensive line rotation, and if they are going to ascend to like a top 15 defense, a top 12 defense, whatever we think success, I know we'll talk about what we think success looks like for Mike Macdonald's first year, but I think that if they reach that point, Jarran Reed has to make a pretty tangible impact, because he broke out last year. Yes. in a way that none of us expected. We thought that was kind of a bottom of the bill signing, if that's what you want to call it, where it was just
it just felt like a retread.
A snap eater, right?
Yes.
And he was a lot more than that. So I know we got Leonard Williams. Uchenna Nwosu is hurt, but hopefully he'll be coming back soon. All indications are pointing in that direction. But if they want to reach their top 10% outcomes, Jarran Reed has to be a big part of that.
Totally agree.
So let's move on to the next question from our friend C. Mike Spin Move. Griff asks.
Shout out Griff. Loved seeing him jump in, man. One of the smartest people tweeting about the Seahawks, that's for sure.
How many targets each for the 3 wide receivers and Fant this year? To which I have a follow-up question for Griff. Which Fant? I need to know.
Yeah,
we need to ask follow-up.
Two great tight ends with the last name Fant. I'm going to assume he's talking about Noah here. So, Mike, you know that one of my biggest annoyances with the Seahawks for the last half decade has been how few plays they run on offense, and there are a number of factors that go into it. The biggest one being the defense just doesn't get off the field. They've been bad on third down on both sides of the ball for a long time. And as a result, they've run fewer plays than anybody else in the NFL over the last 4 years. They ran the fewest plays in the NFL last year, and they have too much talent on offense for that to be the case. So last year, they threw the ball roughly 550 times, which, I mean, they actually had a higher pass to run ratio than most people think. They were close to the median in the NFL in terms of total pass attempts. I expect that to go up. I expect the defense to get off the field better this year. And I do expect, if Abe Lucas is healthy, that the blocking will be better, which will allow the Seahawks to stay on the field on offense longer. So I'm projecting roughly 590 to 600 pass attempts. And I think that's really, really important when we talk about targets, because no matter what team you're on, there's only 100% target share to go around. And DK Metcalf has commanded 24 to 28% of those targets. Those are elite numbers throughout his career, ever since his second year in the league. And it just hasn't translated into a lot of total targets because they just haven't run a lot of plays. Last year, he had 119 targets. This year, I do expect that to take a leap to about 145. So my prediction for DK Metcalf, and again, we're assuming that Madden settings, we're turning the injuries off for the sake of this discussion. 145 for DK to lead the way. I think Tyler Lockett out targets JSN up until the bye. And I think Jacson Smith-Njigba is going to run away with it on the back end. I've got him for 120 targets, and I think that Tyler Lockett settles in around 95 to 100. And, you add all of that up, you've got about 460 targets to those 3 guys. And look, Seattle has always siloed their targets to their top 2 or 3 guys. Ryan Grubb did the same thing at UW. I expect that to continue. That's going to leave roughly 150 targets to go around to the Jake Bobos and the reserve tight ends and the running backs. And I think that all adds up. So it's a long way of saying 145 for DK, 120 for JSN, and 95 for Tyler Lockett. And Fant, I think, gobbles up about 80 to 85 of the remainder.
Yeah, because last year Fant had 43, Colby had 35, Disley had 20. So
there were about 100 tight end targets last year. I think there will be about 120 tight end targets this year, and I expect Noah Fant to get about 85 of them.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. Next question from @Hawks Ninja. They ask, who, in your opinion, will end up being the breakout player for the Seahawks this year, and who will be the one that will disappoint the most? And they clarify and say one player in each category on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, this is such a good question. There's a few players who have already broken out on this team. On offense, I think obviously Tyler Lockett is well established. DK Metcalf is established. I think Geno broke out 2 years ago. Ken Walker broke out 2 years ago. So not counting any of those guys. Look, it's Jacson Smith and Jigba on offense. He's too good. And he was so criminally misused. I don't want to spend too much time on it because Shane Waldron is gone. And it's like a very decaying horse carcass when it comes to the way that JSN was used last year with a super low depth of target. That's not who he was. He was not a gadget player. He was not Rondale Moore. He was not Tavon Austin coming out of college. He was the guy that outproduced Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, despite being 2 years younger than those guys at Ohio State. That's who he is. He's a complete wide receiver. And Ryan Grubb knows that. Ryan Grubb has talked about that. And he is a perfect fit for this offense. So I think he's the breakout on offense. And we got a glimpse of it for about 2 months last year. But this is the year of Boye Mafe. I heard an interview from our guy, Brock Heward, a friend of the show, was talking actually this morning with Daniel Jeremiah, who, again, one of the most connected people in the entire league. And they were talking about Boye Mafe. And he said, this is a guy who plays without that instinct that we're kind of talking about. But DJ was also saying it's less important at edge because it really is about the physical tools and learning how to harness them. And Boye Mafe is like a borderline Olympic athlete. Like, this guy is such a freak. And he had the 7 straight games with the sack last year. And then when Uchenna Nwosu got hurt and he started to kind of be the targeted guy by opposing offenses, he struggled with that a little bit. His production dipped. But there was refinement in his game that we saw at the end of the season that we didn't see in his first year and a half. He was better with his hands. He was better with anticipation. I think this is the year that he breaks out. So my answers for that are JSN on offense and Boye Mafe on defense.
Boye Mafe is exactly the guy that you want to see break out under Mike Macdonald. Mm-hmm. Like, he is the target of that anticipation to see what Macdonald can do and unlock in this defense.
He's not the same level of prospect, but I think he's a very similar athlete to Jadeveon Clowney. And what Mike Macdonald did with a 30-year-old Jadeveon Clowney last year, there's nothing about 24-year-old Boye Mafe that tells me he doesn't have the physical ability to do what an older Clowney did last year.
Yeah. Yeah. Before you move on to the disappointments, that sounds so brutal and scathing. Just phrasing it like that.
Hey man, we're nothing if not honest on this show.
Right. That's right. I'll just give one player across both sides of the ball that I think could break out this year, and I think it's Charles Cross. I think that the injury that he sustained in week 1 was really unfortunate and hampered him throughout the season. But this is a guy who came with the pedigree as being a top-notch pass blocker in college football, right? Mississippi State, Mike Leach offense. He's just on an island shutting down SEC pass rushers. Goes top 10. And he comes into the league with the question marks around his run blocking ability. And he was top 5 in the league last year in run block win rate. So you see what he could do potentially with a full bill of health. Hopefully you get Abe Lucas healthy. So, there's a little bit of, Christian Haynes coming on. We'll discuss him in a few minutes here, but with Connor Williams and some level of, equilibrium, let's say, on the line, and obviously injuries come, but hopefully he can make it through this season healthy. And I think if that happens, then he'll be a major piece in the success of Geno Smith in this offense.
I mean, that's what he was drafted to be. And, Cross, I think, remember when we had Walter Jones on the show and, we were talking to him about his personal success, and he just kept deferring to how important it was for any individual offensive lineman to be successful, that the other guys on the line do their job, because if they don't, it almost doesn't matter how well you do yours. And so, Charles Cross, didn't seem like he was amazing last year. And part of that was because expectations were higher because he proved himself as a rookie. The other was, like you said, he played through an injury. And then beyond that, everyone else on the line was pretty bad once Abe Lucas got hurt. And so he was carrying a lot of weight. But yeah, I love that call. As far as the disappointments go, you mentioned him earlier. I think Christian Haynes is a player with a lot of upside. I'll be pretty surprised if he's a substantial contributor in year one.
He's the name that I had down for this.
Yeah. And
not by any fault of his own, just kind of by the way it goes.
And I think that, we tend as fans to underrate how difficult it is to succeed as a rookie because we spend so much time talking about the rookies that do well, whether it's through fantasy football or just looking at the league as a whole. You see a dozen or more rookies every year flash, and it's like, oh my God, this guy is going to be amazing. He's going to be a star. He's everything he was drafted to be. What we don't spend nearly as much time talking about is the other 90% of rookies that really struggle with that transition. And as good as I think Christian Haynes can be, and I think he's the first guard in probably 8 or 10 years that Seattle has drafted that grades out better in pass protection than in run blocking. I think he has that to his game. His first step, his ability to get into pass pro in one step is better than any guard they've drafted probably ever since John Schneider came on. It's still such a steep climb to go from blocking at UConn to blocking in the NFC West. And I think Anthony Bradford is going to hold him off for most of, if not the entire year.
All right. Next question comes in from Hustle Chilson. Hustle asks,
love Hustle,
the very, very important question that people need the answer to. Do you guys count Jake Bobo as a full point in the Jacson versus Mike name war? One could argue that by choosing to be called Jake, he's only worth a half point at best, which I would respond to and say that he is actively shirking the tag of Jacson and avoiding it, not to be associated with such a toxic brand.
Of course you would say that. That's the coward's answer. Listen, if we're going to discount Team Jacson for Bobo going by Jake, then we got to discount every Mike that decides to go by Michael. Listen, we have always on this show grouped them together. So no, Hustle, we do not discount Jake from Team Jacson. He is a full Jacson.
Well, that's good to know because in that case, we've got Michael Barrett, Michael Dixon, Michael Jarrell, Mike Macdonald, and Mike Morris. So scoreboard's looking pretty nice right now for Team Mike. Feeling great
sure. Yeah.
That.
I mean, to that, I would just say what percentage of Mikes in the world are on the Seahawks versus what percentage of Jacksons in the world are on the Seahawks. And to that, I say scoreboard.
Yeah. Well, we're team volume stats over here. So. Next question comes in from Matt Eitner. Love Matt. Matt asks.
Matt, big supporter of the show. Love you, Matt.
Matt asks, what kind of improvement are you expecting out of the defense under Mike Macdonald in year one?
I'll be happy if this defense is like 18th or better in DVOA. And it kind of pains me to say that because I don't think that they're a bottom third team in terms of talent on defense, but they are learning a new language this year. I don't think there was a defense being run in the NFL, in the entire world of football last year, more different than the defense the Seahawks have been running than Mike Macdonald's. It requires an entirely new framing in terms of how you view your assignments, how you look at keys from offensive players, and how you pass off those assignments to your teammates. Seattle has been so scatterbrained on defense that even being in the middle third this year represents a big victory. So yeah, I do expect them to be 18th or better in DVOA this year. There is a range of outcomes where they are top 10 or top 12, but everywhere Mike Macdonald has gone where he's had real impact on the defense, and I'm talking about like defensive coordinator, when he went to Michigan, They were very bad. They were 119th in the nation in points allowed. It took him 2 years to get them to number 9. When he took over for the Ravens, they were 26th in the NFL in points allowed. It took them 2 years to get them to number 1. I expect significant improvement this year, but I do think history shows, not only with Mike Macdonald, but with most schemes, that it is a 2-year project. And so, middle third would be my expectation. My hope, of course, is top third.
Then I'll ask you this, different but similar framing. What is your expectation, assuming mean injury luck, that the Seahawks offensive line will rank at in terms of the rest of the league?
I think when Charles Cross, Connor Williams, and Abe Lucas are all playing, there's no reason this isn't a top 12 offensive line. And I say that, understanding that even top 12, it's a pretty low bar in the NFL. The gap in talent between defensive linemen and offensive linemen grows every single year. And the injury rate for offensive linemen is so high. There aren't 150 great NFL caliber offensive linemen. It's why every year 27 or 28 teams in the NFL are unhappy with their offensive line. That being said, I think Charles Cross is an above average left tackle. I think a healthy Connor Williams is an above average center. And I think a healthy Abe Lucas is like an elite right tackle. And so if they're all healthy, yeah, this can be a top 10, top 12 offensive line. They're just fragile. Any of those 3 guys miss games, they could be atrocious again. They could be terrible. And I'm hoping that this offense has the ability to adjust for that in ways that the offense hasn't really been able to do the last few years. But I do think Seattle has 3 very good offensive linemen. I can't tell you the last time since maybe like 2014 that I could say that. So yeah, turn off injuries. Sure. This could be top 10.
Okay. I will.
All right. But with injuries, the big caveat is there's no depth on this offensive line that I'm confident in at all.
Yeah. Stone Forsythe still has that Hall of Fame name, so maybe that will actualize into something on the field. But
totally.
All right. Somewhat interconnected with that offensive line, our friend of the show, My Broken Butt, shout out My Broken Butt, makes the statement, Shane Waldron got hit with the alien boring ray by quarter 2 really every game last year, and then asks, any fears of Grubb being its next victim?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Of course. Ryan Grubb's never coached at the NFL level. That's absolutely a fear. And the thing is, I think Shane Waldron's first year in Seattle was pretty good. Like, I think he did a really nice job of calling plays throughout the game. Last year, his opening scripts were good. Seattle was a very good team in terms of EPA, in terms of points per drive in their first 2 drives of games last year. But you're right. They got figured out almost every week over the last 3 months of the season. I think that there is a dynamism to Ryan Grubb's offense that didn't exist with Shane Waldron. A Shane Waldron offense requires everything to be on time in order to work because it didn't push the ball down the field with intention. It didn't have a lot of counter concepts. It didn't have a lot of motion. Like, yes, technically Seattle ran motion at a higher than average pace last year. But that was pre-snap motion, and then the guys settle in and they're stagnant before the snap. With Ryan Grubb, and we've seen it in the preseason, there are guys moving at the snap. That is a cheat code. You give your playmakers momentum at the snap because the defenders don't get that. And so I do think that there's going to be a learning curve for Ryan Grubb. I think there are going to be games this season where he looks lost. But when he gets his feet underneath him, I do think that there is proof of concept with the type of offense that Ryan Grubb wants to run that translates to the NFL. I think of all the top offenses in college football last year, The University of Washington's was the most pro ready in terms of the concepts they ran and what they asked of their best players. So, yeah, of course it is a fear, my broken butt, but I have more confidence in Grubb to counterpunch than I ever did in Shane Waldron.
I'm trying not to be a prisoner of the moment here, but do you think that heading into this season, the Seahawks have, in theory, the two most exciting and intriguing play callers that they've ever hired on either side of the ball at the same time?
I don't even have to think hard about that. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I think the best play caller in Seahawks history is Mike Holmgren, and I am not ready to put Ryan Grubb there. But in terms of excitement, I think his ceiling is really, really high in terms of, if everything clicks, this being an elite offense, that is absolutely in his range of outcomes.
I guess fascinating is the right word for this.
Yeah. And then Macdonald, I mean, look, until shown otherwise, this is the most exciting defensive hire for any team in a very, very long time. I mean, this guy is to defense what Sean McVay was to offense. He has the ability to dictate terms on defense in a way that has become very, very difficult to do in the modern NFL, when everything the NFL is doing, from new rules to points of emphasis with refereeing, etc., it's all about stacking the deck in the offense's favor, which is, I mean, that's just good business. I'm not arguing against that. Mike Macdonald shut all that shit down. And so, yeah, I do think this is the most exciting combination of offensive and defensive play callers that this team has ever seen.
Next question comes in from Parker Lewis. This is very important stuff. This is investigative journalism right here. The other night, somebody tweeted out that if Florida State lost to Boston College, that they would engage in some heinous mastication, if you will.
That's fair.
I guess I'll leave it at that. Jackson, why
I
are you
believe he
avoiding
said
the
he
noise?
would eat dog shit out of a red Solo cup.
With a spoon, I'm pretty sure, specifically.
Yeah, he was very specific. And then Boston College beat Florida State. And apparently this dude deleted all of his social media accounts. I want to go on record and say, that was not me. I know that he had a beard, and I know that he had a fade, and I know that he was holding a cigar when he said it. That was not me. Stop tagging me in that post.
Have you and that guy ever been seen in the same room? I don't think so. And that's all the evidence that I need. Okay. Next question comes in.
That was the worst part of my week.
It was like uncanny too. It was so perfect. God. It is perfect because it's like the Twitter profile picture, so it's just small enough to where you two are like almost indistinguishable.
Unreal.
It was shout out that dude for really setting himself up.
This dude who, again, and I cannot be more forthright or clear about this, is not me, needs to get back on the grid and face the music. I need to see you eat the shit.
Yeah. No, it's an absolute necessity. So, okay, on to less important things. Question comes in from Peter at HD Robot. Peter asks, what is the minimum accomplishment for you to call this season a success? And what would have to happen for you to call the decision to move on from Pete Carroll a mistake?
Oh, man. The second part of that question is so good. I'll answer the first part first. I think most people asking this question are looking for something measurable as an answer. And I don't want to deflect away from that. I'm not avoiding that. But for me, it is an eye test answer. I need to see them block and tackle better. I need to see them look competent at the two most basic parts of football: blocking and tackling. Seattle's been really bad at that for a long time. And, one name we haven't mentioned on this episode is Scott Huff, who was UW's offensive line coach. UW was named the number one offensive line in the country last year. We had Softy on, very, very, very connected to that program. We asked him, okay, how much of that is just recruiting versus coaching? He's like, look, man, it's coaching. Like, yeah, they had some guys, but it's not like these were the 5 best offensive line recruits in the country. They were coached up to block really, really well. And they did that. And, so I am expecting the coaching in those two things to be much better. I need to be able to watch a Seahawks game and have confidence in open field tackling and one-on-one blocking. That is the minimum accomplishment for me to call it a success. Now, if we're looking for something measurable, I want to see them minimum top 16 offensive DVOA, top 20 defensive DVOA, minimum. My expectations are higher, but that's baseline. Second part of the question, what would have to happen for me to call the decision to move on from Pete a mistake? Look, I don't want my excitement about Mike Macdonald to be interpreted as a denigration of Pete or a lack of appreciation for what he accomplished. I am so on the record. I have spilled so much ink and spent so much airtime in my appreciation of what Pete Carroll accomplished and what he has meant to the Seahawks franchise, to the city of Seattle, to me personally as a man. But it was time, man. It was time. And so for it to feel like a mistake, the vibes would have to be really bad. I don't even care about win-loss record. They could go 4-13. I still think it was time to move on from Pete Carroll. But if they're like 4-13 and the vibes are atrocious and they're just getting blown out every game and Mike Macdonald has lost the locker room, like if he's Josh McDaniels or Matt Patricia, yes, mistake. Because you gave this guy a 6-year contract. But that's not going to happen. There's no indication of that. Josh McDaniel, Matt Patricia, coaches like that, they're hated by their players. And there is nothing about the way Mike Macdonald conducts his business or the way that players and other coaches and our friends who cover this team have talked about the way that he approaches it that gives me any reason to think the vibes are going to be bad. So as long as the vibes aren't terrible, this was the right hire. It honestly doesn't even really matter to me how many games they win this year. I still think it was time to try something different.
What a wild outcome to consider, a 4-13 season, but the vibes are good.
I know. All right. And I realized that as I was saying it, and it's not even that vibes are good, right? But like there's teams that struggle. And I look at the Cardinals last year. They started off 1-9, 1-8. And it's like, yeah, they ended up winning 5 games, but you know what? Their vibes are good. And I think that happens. The Lions weren't good Dan Campbell's first year, but the vibes were good, even though they weren't winning a lot of games. Like there is a difference sometimes between your win-loss record and what the vibes are. And this is a very vibes forward show. I feel like you and I are very in tune with the vibes of the team, and the way that we talk to our guests who know more about this team than we do are focused on what's the feeling with these guys. And look, it's just been an A+ report card so far. So yeah, I mean, it would just have to feel Matt Patricia-ish, where he's getting sneak dissed on Twitter by his players by the end of the year for me to say, okay, maybe this was a mistake.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, a 14-3 season where the vibes are bad. We call that the entire New England Patriots dynasty.
Yeah, totally. That's like the Eagles last year where they were like 10-1, and like there were stories that came out.
Sirianni shouting in the tunnel or whatever.
Totally, and players talking about how like even at 10-1 they were still just like not over the Super Bowl loss, or I mean, yeah, you remember the 11-0 Steelers from a few years ago? They were totally fraudulent and got exposed in the back half in the playoffs. Like there were bad vibes on the team, but they were winning games. And so, one of the things we really strive for with this show is to understand that wins and losses, yes, that's what determines ultimately the quote unquote success of a season. It's not really the most reflective measure of how a team is doing.
No doubt. All right. We got one more from Connor Gentis. Jacques Bobo. Connor says, I love Geno. Dude is my damn avatar. But if Dak hits the open market this offseason, do you make him the highest paid quarterback, pending health and similar performance to recent past? Or would you rather extend Geno into a Kirkish pay range, low 40 millions? And I'm guessing that's assuming that we get, the median Geno performance that in the range of outcomes.
That's how I took that question too.
For this season.
I'm going to say, Connor, this is my favorite question of the entire week. And Mike, I appreciate you saving it for last. Quarterback's always going to be the biggest lightning rod conversation, unless you have a minted elite quarterback. And really, there's like no more than 3 to 6 of those at any given time in the league. Unless you're lucky to have one of those, there's always going to be debate about the quarterback. You and I are both pretty brazen in our opinion of Geno Smith being a good quarterback. I think that he's nipping at the heels of the great tier. That said, Dak is better. I think Dak is one of the 5 or 6 best people on the planet at playing the quarterback position. The delta in talent between Dak and Geno is not as big as the delta between what they're going to get paid with their next contracts. If it takes 40 to 42 million a year to get what we've gotten from Geno the last 2 years, and yes, look, I'm going to address the same thing that I see on Twitter all the time when any new metric comes out. And by the way, every new metric that comes out has Geno as a top 10 quarterback in like every measurable way that's not just volume stats. There's always pushback that, he only threw for so many yards, or he's got these great receivers and, he was 16th in touchdowns or whatever. Look, raw numbers tell such a faint version of the story. You got to remember, Seattle is running fewer plays than every other team in the NFL. What they're doing with those plays on offense, especially when Abe Lucas is healthy, is pretty remarkable. Geno Smith has been a top 10 quarterback by almost every advanced metric over the last 2 years. And it's easy to forget because he got labeled with this kind of bust moniker so early in his career and then spent so long as a backup. It's like his story was written. But I really, again, encourage everyone to set that aside and just look at what he does with the situation that he's been faced. This is a quarterback that faced the second highest pressure rate in the NFL last year, but was top 3 in avoiding sacks, was top 3 in completion percentage when pressured, was number 1 in downfield accuracy. This is a guy that can make every throw, that has command of his offense, that can make pre-snap adjustments, that can do all of the things that make a good quarterback really good. And I say all of that to say Dak is even better. Dak is better at all of that. But Dak is going to cost $60 million. And it's really hard to win a Super Bowl. Rings culture has destroyed so much intelligent sports dialogue because this player hasn't won a Super Bowl. They can't actually be that good. Look, Dak is freakish as a quarterback with the way that he can manipulate a game. And it's reflected in his stats every single year, but just watching him, you see it. Sticking with the same team. It's the same kind of fate that Tony Romo faced, right? Just couldn't get deep enough into the playoffs to shake the can't win in the big game. And look, man, I take a more holistic view of quarterback than that. So if I'm paying Dak $60 million, does Dak Prescott make the Seahawks a better team over the next 3 years than Geno Smith? I think so. Yes, I do. Is that gap big enough to pull $20 million a year away from the rest of the roster? No, I don't. I would rather have Geno 40 to 42 than Dak at 60 to 65.
And if Geno tails off at the end of the season after that extension, just trading with the Denver Broncos. Easy money. Great return on your investment.
Yeah, man. God, I love the Denver Broncos. Thank God for that, man. Thank God for that new ownership group. Woo-wee.
Sometimes I was telling you, I think about that trade sometimes, and I don't really connect the two of these, but that really was the Super Bowl 48 of trades.
Yeah.
They're just a punching bag for whatever medium the Seahawks want to engage them in.
Oh, man. Who did the Seahawks play in Super Bowl 48?
You're gonna have to Google that one. But
listen, man, Connor, that was an amazing question, and I'm so grateful for it because I think it was a really intentional framing of where we view Geno Smith. And look, Steven Ruiz, who we've had on the show, and who really is one of the guys in all of NFL media that puts the most effort and I think takes the right approach to QB evaluation. He released his initial QB rankings for the 2024 season, and he has Geno at number 10, and that's about right. You know, I think that he is that good, and I think that he has been really hamstrung, not by the talent around him, but by the situation, if that makes sense.
If Geno plays the way that we think that he can, that a lot of people, certified ball knowers galore, think that he can,
yes,
then
they all do.
That will not be, Geno Smith will not be the downfall of the Seahawks in 2024.
No. He's not perfect, far from it, but like there is one perfect quarterback on this planet right now. You know, everyone else is trying to make do with managing and navigating the most difficult position in all of American professional sports. And I think Geno does that better than all but about 10 people on the planet right now. And if you can get that guy for we're seeing Jordan Love and Tua and Jared Goff and soon Brock Purdy getting $50+ million a year. I think Geno's every bit as good as any one of them. I think you put Geno in Miami or San Francisco's offense, and he's doing everything Tua and Brock Purdy are plus some. You put him in Detroit, he's doing everything Jared Goff is doing. I think he's that good. And so if you can get him at a 20% discount, which is probably what it would take to extend him, yeah, I'm just doing that. And I'm putting that, remaining money into the rest of my roster.
I'm glad that before the end of the show, we were able to get a little bit of Geno evangelism in there. It's important, right? It's important stuff.
Well, it is. And I wouldn't do it if I didn't believe it. Like,
totally.
This is not me cheerleading. You remember
when we're not blowing smoke here. Well, you are, but like in a different
I'm literally blowing smoke right now. Yeah. But no, I mean, you make a great point, Mike. When we started this show, we couldn't have picked a worse time from a vibe standpoint to start the show.
Week. Literally the week. There could not have been a worse day to choose our first episodes.
Yeah. Recording. And so, starting with that Russell Wilson finger injury and everything that happened since then, when it became Geno versus Drew Lock for the starting position, I was adamant in saying that it didn't really matter to me who was the starting quarterback because they weren't going to be the starting quarterback after 2022. And I was wrong. I was just wrong about that. Geno was so much better than my expectations, so much better than I think most people's expectations, maybe everyone outside of his family's expectations. And one thing that I'm never going to do is have take lock. If you provide me compelling information that challenges an opinion I have, I'm going to analyze that. I'm going to see if it's worth changing my opinion. Geno's play has done that. He's been so good. So good. So this is not Pollyanna. This is not Seahawks homerism. This is me watching a quarterback dealing with horrific offensive line play and a defense that can't get off the field. So he has fewer opportunities to succeed than literally every other quarterback in the NFL. And what he's done with that has been really remarkable to me. So until I am presented with information that tells me that he's not good, I'm going to continue to say he's good because Geno Smith is a good quarterback. And if you're a Seahawks fan and you're upset about the quarterback situation, I'm just going to implore you to change the perspective. And there's a lot of other things you can be frustrated about with this team. But the reason that they haven't won more games over the last 2 years, it's not their quarterback. See, now I got my dander up. We got to close the show down, but now I'm all fired up. I don't know how I'm going to sleep tonight. Connor, thank you for that question. Really, really glad we got a chance to dive into that in a way that's not just, asking a guest, what do you think about Geno? And to all of our guests' credit, they do give honest opinions on that. But there's also a reason that almost to a man, everyone we've had on this show has a favorable opinion of the way that Geno Smith has played. So thank you for that question. Thank you to everyone for all the questions. Apologies to those that we didn't get to. We had so many good ones, but I mean, if we're up to me, we'd have a 3-hour show every week, but y'all got limited time. And so really, really grateful for the questions we were able to answer. And look, that's going to do it for today. I want to, again, thank everyone for chipping in, asking those questions. And look, as always, you can find Mike and I on social media. I am on Twitter at Jacson Bevins. That's Jacson. Remember that no K is okay when spelling my name. Mike is on Twitter at Mike Barwin. And the show itself is at Cigar Thoughts. You can catch full video episodes on our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts and find the rest of our socials at cigarthoughtsnfl.com. As mentioned previously, this episode is brought to you by Balvenie Premium Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. You already know how big of a fan I am of them. There's a reason that they are in regular rotation for me. And one of the great things about a great Scotch is how well it goes with a great cigar. We already talked about the Cigar Thoughts Red Zone series. The Cigar Thoughts Originals also available for purchase at the same link on the show page, cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Click them if you like a little bit darker cigar, which when I really first got into high-end cigars, I tended more towards that Maduro profile. Right now, I'm a little bit in the lighter phase, so I'm really into the red zones, but we got you covered on both ends with those. So go to the show page, cigarthoughtsnfl.com, click the link, buy yourself some stogies. Again, only $149 for a bundle of 10. And look, you can listen to this show anywhere you get your podcast. So whether you're Apple, Spotify, Audible, wherever, we got you. We're there. If you like the show, leave us a 5-star rating and a quick review, because that feedback is really helpful for us. Our goal is to give you the best show that we can, and we can't do that without your feedback. So thank you to all of y'all listening for your continued support. We know that you've only got so much time for podcasts in your life, and it is an honor to be a part of that for y'all. Please know that by sharing the show on social media and with your friends, give us the juice to keep making it happen. We will be back soon, and the next time you see us, the season will have started. We'll have actual real football that counts to talk about. So in the meantime, onwards and upwards, my friends.